Welcome back to the Normal Sports Show. This is episode, I think it's 7 that we've done. Back for another fun one. We've got Jason Page playing the pop-in, fact-checking, kind of producing type role. Jason, how are we doing?
It's a fluid role. I'm just doing my best out here. Yeah, good to be here.
And then the main event, we've got James Colgan, golf.com. James, how are you doing?
I'm doing a little worse now that I know I'm going to be fact-checked here. I exist better in a space where I could sort of just speak without fear of sounding like the idiot that I secretly am. So,
well, I'm really excited to have you on. I've been thinking through like, okay, who are the people when we're at majors that I have fun, good conversations with? Let's just turn the mics on and do that on a podcast. So we had Luke Curdanin on. Obviously, having you on. You guys are people that. So I had Solly on early to talk Ryder Cup. These are people that when I'm at the majors, it's like, oh, we just had an hour and a half conversation. Wish somebody was taping that so that other people could hear it also. You just drove across the country. You have a fun piece on golf.com about driving from New York to Utah. My question for you is how you drove, I believe with your girlfriend. How do you guys pass the time? Is it audiobooks? Is it podcasts? Is it music? What does that look like in your vehicle for 15 hours?
all right, yeah, this is a great question because we spent basically the entirety of a week driving between various places. We wanted to see some friends along the way, so we didn't exactly take the shortest route as we were driving, relocating to Park City for the winter here because we're a pair of ski bums, I guess. But basically, when we were setting up to do the drive, we were kind of freaking out about, oh man, we got to get as many podcasts and audiobooks, and like we got to download as much music as humanly possible so that we can't forget anything. And so we downloaded all this stuff, and then we started driving, and we realized, we both work remote jobs. So we both had to work as we were driving. And when the other person was working, we didn't want to have any audio playing because, you're trying to focus, you're trying to write, trying to do whatever, respond to emails. And so we wound up not listening to anything for the balance of the drive, which is absolutely insane. But yeah, that was what we did. I have about 2 terabytes of unlistened to audiobooks and podcasts and music on my phone here. So if I need anything, I guess in the next 2 years, I should be all right. But yeah, the drive out was a surprising amount of silence down I-80.
This is the downside. It's the upside and the downside of this work from anywhere, always have internet, Starlink economy, right? Where you're I'm going on vacation with my family. On the front end of that, I can finish off a newsletter and while my wife is driving and the kids are watching a movie in the back. But the downside of that is I don't get to just sit there and watch Nebraska and Ohio and Pennsylvania pass me. But that's I think you and I are in agreement probably. That's some of the best parts of life is just noticing and observing. And I don't know which would you give that up to not have the ability to work from anywhere?
Yeah, it's funny you say this actually, because one of the weirdest things that I found during this drive, Kyle, was that I was actually a more efficient writer while sitting in the passenger seat of a 2011 Toyota Highlander
for sure
than I was sitting in my desk in my normal apartment, living my normal life, doing my normal work. It was a really bizarre thing where just having a little bit of idle stimulation around me, something I could look out the window at as we were kind of driving along, was actually really helpful for my creative process in some weird way. But yeah, it was definitely a little awkward. When we hit the western part of Colorado, basically everything west of Denver, you're driving on I-70 at that point through the most beautiful mountain passes and these incredible tapestry of tans and reds and burnt oranges, and it's one of the most stunning drives of 4 or 5 hours I've ever done in my life anywhere. And as we were doing it, I was trying to file a story about, I don't even remember what I was writing about. And I was so annoyed by the fact that I was trying to write this story in the middle of driving in this beautiful landscape. So I definitely feel it on both sides, but I guess I'm appreciative to my bosses at golf.com because they at least allow me to roll up and continue living my life out here in Park City for a winter. They didn't yell at me and tell me to get lost when I pitched them on the idea of me becoming a skier for a couple months. So I guess I will I'll choose the high road here and just say I'm appreciative of that.
Well, I'm with you because I think I like how things are. I like that I can work while I'm going to vacation and I don't have to formally take off, 7 days from this desk job or whatever. But there's definitely downsides to it. What you were saying reminded me of an old Bill Simmons podcast. This was from 15 years ago. He did the Half-Baked Ideas with Kevin Wildes, I think, is who he used to have on. And one of their ideas, I can't remember who had it, but he was talking about how you should provide a service where people go to the airport and they fly in a plane, but the plane just flies like in a circle for 3 hours. And that's the time that they can do like creative work, like on their, laptop, or I don't even know if iPads were out yet, but I was like, it was definitely a half-baked idea because the economics or whatever. But I was like, that is brilliant because I find myself, and maybe you do too, Jason, like getting way more work done on planes or like when I'm in a car than I do just sitting here like clicking around, Twitter and ESPN.com and all these other places.
I think we're laying the foundations to like a revolutionary golf media residency, like on the road residency, pretty much.
You just drive back and forth with me and James across the United States. That would be hell for a lot of people, I think.
I mean, imagine like back in the day, they used to have to drive to all the tournaments, so there could have been like some sort of
yeah, but they also didn't have Starlink to file their golf.com column for Thursday.
Wait, but Kyle, I had no idea that this was a Simmons thing. I have been saying that exact idea since like 2019. Like I've been saying like not the airport version, but I've been saying if my bosses wanted me to be like the most efficient version of myself doing the most amount of work every single day, they would pay for me to get on a train that like drove 4 hours out into the middle of nowhere and then 4 hours back.
Totally.
And I would just be able to write 15 stories a day. It would be the most productive writer on earth. I could, write a book in a week or something crazy. I had no idea that was a
Simmons thing. No, it's been, I think it was Kevin Wildes. I think that was his name that came. He was like a executive at ESPN. I don't know where he's at now, but I thought it was a brilliant idea. Where do you land, James, on in sort of productivity economy? Because I think we're in this world where you and I get online, let's say on a Tuesday morning when we're taping this, and it's like, okay, there's a piece of golf news, okay, here's 7 things about how to be more productive, how to be like 7% more productive. Where do you net out on all that? Are you in on it? Are you cold plunging every day? Just what's your take on it?
Well, I'm definitely a bit of an obsessive when it comes to like trying to maximize my hours in the day. I'm like super regimented in my routine. I like to have a very specific time I wake up in the morning, a very specific morning walk that I go on before I try to start doing any sort of creative work. I try to do a bunch of clerical stuff because I'm not really a morning person. And then in the afternoons, I like really try to lean into my creative side. And that is a sort of setup that I have evolved over the years into something that really works and fits my goals. But it's interesting that you asked me this because I think something that I've been thinking a tremendous amount about recently is this kind of like impending AI revolution. And as I've been in the thick of learning more about this stuff, I'm like a total futurist, I guess is what my bosses have said to me. I'm like, I'm very, very into this stuff, I guess, as a natural predisposition. So it makes me an effective communicator when it comes to some of this stuff. But as I've been kind of reading a lot more about this AI stuff, like something that has really stuck out to me is the idea that a lot of the sort of baseline work that comes as a part of our everyday lives will be pretty easily netted out over the next 15 years if this technology is as totally transformative as we believe that it will be. And in a world where the like small box checking tasks, especially the box checking creative tasks, are like going to be very easily replaced by a computer, whether that's your 300-word news stories or your like breaking news tweets or whatever it is. Like in that world, in my opinion, the thing that will be really kind of the separator, the divider, will be people who can do things that are like noticeably significant or different things that really stand out against the background of a world where there's just kind of like infinite content. And I think that's been sort of like always the game of doing media work. But I feel like it's really accelerating right now. And so it has me thinking a lot about this like use of my productivity throughout my day. And I find that what I'm optimizing for now is like focusing a lot more on being able to do the big ideas as opposed to handling this very small tasks that could sort of easily be metered out. So anyway, that's a really long answer to describe how I think about this stuff, but it's something I think a ton about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it can sometimes feel better to do the little tasks because you're like, look at how much I got done. And it's like, well,
yeah,
those are not, to use a sports term that LKD and I used in the last episode, those are not high leverage situations. Like they're very low leverage. Like you can, in the future, maybe, farm those out to a robot. But even now you can hire like someone to do those things to be able to focus on what you are more skilled at or more gifted in or whatever. So I do think that I find myself in the trap of like, and Jason can attest to this, of like completing all these small tasks. And it's like, well, I got a lot done, but I didn't really move the ball forward in terms of the business or the news, all these different things. How have you used, this is not what we're here to talk about, but I'm curious about this. How do you currently use any sort of AI tools to help you in your research, writing, reporting for golf.com?
Yeah, so I have a really, really hard line when it comes to this stuff. I won't use AI to help my writing in any way. I am like a total purist when it comes to the writing experience. That is why I'm in this industry. That's why I love what I do. It's not necessarily the sports world. It's more the writing. And because of that, I don't ever want to be in a place where I'm like outsourcing kind of the hard work to some algorithm or large language model or whatever. But as far as like knowledge expansion, which in my mind is a tremendous component of being a really good writer, is knowing a lot about a lot of things or a little about a lot of things. I am like a huge proponent of utilizing chatbots. I'm like I was in on ChatGPT early. I'm now like a proud Claude user. I'm like deep in the weeds when it comes to this stuff. But I would say the big thing is that, like, for me at least, I have found that it sort of cuts down on the amount of time I go from having a question to having an answer. And I know there's like a lot of controversy around, all right, well, how much can you trust the answer that you're getting? How accurate is the answer? Like, I fully understand all of that. And I really try to like factor for my fear of sounding like an idiot because I'm completely wrong because I've been fed bad information by an AI chatbot. And so I really do go to like pretty long lengths to try to avoid running into those things. But I found, as far as just like basic knowledge expansion is concerned, like it is the best thing you could possibly do for writing or for just sort of broadening your creative skill set.
Yeah, so two things on that. One, there's a great podcast by a guy named David Perel. He's got a podcast, you've probably heard it, James, but How I Write. And he did a 90-minute episode, I think it was earlier this year, on AI and writing. And it sounds, I think when I say it out loud, it sounds very futuristic, but it's actually very old school in terms of like, hey, here are the old school things that have always worked that will work in the future. And so it gives you a little bit of, I think, guidance for what's happening, but also some hope of like, hey, things aren't changing as much as maybe they are changing, but the fundamentals are not necessarily changing. The second thing, I'm curious about how, like, okay, so I just read your Internet Invitational piece for golf.com, and it was interesting. It was good. I'm curious, like, for something like that, where it's I would say more of an opinion, like explanation type piece. How do you use Claude or ChatGPT for stuff like that?
Trying to think if that was one where I utilized AI for anything. I don't think so. I might use it for, like, for example, like a lot of times I'll find myself like very curious about like philosophical ideas, or like, you know, the various erasers, you know, like Occam's razor, things like that.
Oh yeah.
And I like won't know the answer to that off the top of my head. And Googling it might take me a minute, 2 minutes. Like that's not a lot of time. And I'm not one of these like value maxer, like growth maxer individuals. Like that's not my MO. But I do think that like when it comes to finding those answers quickly, I can reach the place I'm looking for a little bit faster. And then in a sort of broader sense, if I'm like exploring an idea that I haven't necessarily considered. So like this internet invitational idea might not be a good example for it, because that's something that I'm considering all day long, every day of my life anyway. But like, you know, I don't know, something like how like psychedelics could help my golf game or something. Like I might want to understand a little bit about the like, you know, the biology of psychedelics. I might want to understand like how that would actually be affecting my body and my brain chemistry, and how I would be, you know, just how it would be affecting my normal experience of reality. And then I can use my own knowledge of like how golf exists within my perception of the world and whatnot to sort of marry those ideas together. So that's, I feel like, how I mostly will wind up using it for some sort of like work related component. And then a lot of times it's just like, you know, stuff that I might not think has anything to do with work. I'm like staring at a stoplight. I'm wondering how a stoplight works, and something I've never really thought about before. So I, you know, ask, you know, how does a stoplight work? How do we decide how long this red light is? And the fact that it feels like I'm sitting here for 5 minutes, you know, like stuff like that is, I think, where I find myself most compelled to use this technology. And while, of course, it's not, you know, again, not a cure-all to this, I do think it's like a very, very effective tool for finding those kind of small answers in a way that feels value additive to my life. That's not, you know, costing me. I think when you look at like why Google was like great, but is now being iterated upon, it's that Google was a great way to answer your questions, but it wasn't a great way to give you more questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And I think in the AI world, it's a much easier place to ask questions. If you're a curious person, it's a really great place to be.
I find it to be a little bit like Wikipedia in that, or Baseball Reference, in that I'm on it and then like I'm 8, you know, queries or pages deep, and I'm like, I don't even know why I got on here to begin with. But it's great for stuff like my family was in the car the other day, and we got into an argument about how many cups Starbucks goes through in a year. And you could go Google that and figure like back into it based on revenue, like whatever, like you could do all the math on it. But I find it to be incredible for stuff like that of like, hey, what's the math behind this? And that's a low stakes thing, right? I'm not using that for a newsletter or whatever, but it's like super interesting, and it gives me a talking point with the kids. And I don't know, I find it to be like really fun for stuff like that, and very useful for. We recently, Jason can attest to this, we recently wrote our operating agreement for Normal Sport, and we hired a lawyer, which was fairly expensive, and he was awesome. Like he gave us a document and really helped us out. But when I got the document, I'm like, God, it's 36 pages. Like it's going to take me 6 months to figure out what the language is in this, much less to ask it, like, where am I vulnerable? Where's Jason vulnerable? So I just put it in ChatGPT, and I'm like, hey, I'm the sort of main person in this. What are the things that I need to be looking out for? And I find it to be incredibly useful for stuff like that. Like that, it's really good at processing a ton of information like that and giving you back a tiny amount of information that you're looking for. Jason, did you have a follow-up to that?
I had a follow-up about a question for you guys, because one of the things we've been doing when questions like how many cups does Starbucks use per year, that's something you could probably find the information on, but we find it kind of even more exciting just to like get into a debate about it and not use any resources and then just have a conversation about something that we know absolutely nothing about. Are there things in both of your worlds that you think like, no, actually I'd like to just dream about this, and if I'm right, I'm right, or if I'm actually being right doesn't really matter or have any effect on the situation? Do you leave room for that? Or
yeah, I think so. I mean, part of that for me is like just leaving my phone elsewhere during conversation. So whether it's a walk with my wife or a lunch with a friend, giving myself, because if I have my phone, I'm like, it's like going to the store when you're hungry. You're like, yeah, I'm going to buy the Oreos. Like if I have my phone, I'm going to look it up, like I'm not going to be like, oh, well, for the purity of the conversation, I'm going to like preserve what might be the answer. But so I find that I almost have to put everything aside. And I agree with you. Like it's fun to like talk through that. But I have to put the device like in another room or like not take it into lunch or whatever to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, I have a couple of cousins who work, and actually my sister too also works in higher education. And in conversations with them over the last few months, they've been talking about how difficult it is to get college students to like read anything. And I think, there's this sort of like general desire among teenagers right now to like, all right, if I have this 10-page thing, even if it's for like a creative writing class and it's David Foster Wallace, like I'm just going to upload it into ChatGPT and ask it to give me the takeaways. And I think I have a really firm line when I'm consuming something creative that was specifically designed for my entertainment and the consumption process. I like absolutely will not touch a large language model to tell me anything about it. That I think the part of the beauty of that experience is in the fact that you are sort of perceiving it as you're going, whether you're right, wrong, or otherwise. And for me, like as someone who makes creative things that I hope people enjoy consuming for their entertainment, like I view sort of the principal like job that I have as being AI proof, like doing work that could not be replicated or could not be, plugged into a chat bot and said, give me 5 takeaways from this or tell me what I need to know from this information. So yeah, that's just like it's a weird line for someone who's like so into this stuff for me to be like, yeah, good for thee, but not for me. But I do feel strongly about that when it comes to this.
Do you think a big part of that is also just kind of like not protecting the human side of it, but like I think in your Syracuse, there was like an article published by Syracuse about you and PJ going back to give a little presentation, and you talked about humanity. Do you think humanity is kind of like the safeguard for keeping it human or focusing on humane topics or storylines?
Yeah. I think this is something that I have like talked to every single golf.com coworker or college student who's reached out to me or whatever about is like, I think that there is going to be a level of automation, whether it's through AI becoming this truly transformative thing or through whatever the next technology is after that or whatever the next big thing is. Like our lives will become increasingly automated. Things that were once hard will become a lot easier. And that's like a part of the experience. But what we can do as creative people, as people who love to tell stories and entertain people, is to focus on the things and the substance of life, the texture of life that can't really be automated out. And I think that is something that I find like a huge amount of passion and pride for is going to hang out with Jim Nance and Pebble Beach and like asking him about his relationship with God and like his life and whatnot. And I think like having those kinds of conversations, like it doesn't always find its way into my reporting, but it's so much easier for me to be a human being doing human stories that could not possibly be replicated when I'm having those conversations, when I'm pursuing those ends, than if I'm just trying to be the guy who gets the news that, so-and-so is moving to live 15 seconds before it's announced on the official account.
Yeah.
Yeah. I one more thing, I just touching on that, I think that's so well said. And one of the things I noticed as kind of like a reoccurring theme in your work was just this presence of food. Is that also a way of just like getting in touch with?
That's very funny.
The human side of a situation, or how do you see that?
Wow,
or is it just,
I have officially succeeded as a golf writer that someone has asked me about food without me bringing this up in conversation to begin with. This has been the pursuit of my entire career. the short answer is yes and no. So I've like fell in love with food because I fell in love with food writing. I read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential when I was 20 years old, and it was like a completely transformative work. I like had absolutely no idea how much of the world there was out there that I had not experienced until I consumed that, and it made me totally ravenous to like do and try and eat and do everything I possibly could. And I think as a result of loving food writing, I came to love food. And then as a result of loving food, and I think I've kind of always loved food. My mom's Italian, so like food is love in my family, and that's like a whole part of it too. But I think as a result of loving food, I came to realize how like there's a really unique power in an eating culinary experience to like bring people together. And I think that there's just something really beautiful about that I've always loved. I love to cook. Like that is what I do when I'm not thinking about sports or media or AI or whatever. I make food and I cook for the people that I love. And I think that's just the overall experience of like being a creative person. Food is such a great avenue to explore those emotions and those feelings. It's such a great way to do it on my own time that doesn't feel like I'm, trying to write for the sake of writing when I already spend most of my life writing, or, filming a movie when I have chronically shaky hands that can't operate a camera. So, I love food because it's just such an easy avenue into all of that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think that like you're 100% correct that is like it is a connection of and a part of the human experience, and I think that's what endeared me to it in the beginning, and it's certainly what has sort of endured for me, and why I keep writing about food when it comes to golf too.
The Bourdain book is like, it's like, what the hell, man? Like you're like the best, one of the best chefs in the world, and like you write this well. Like it was insane. Like that book is insane. It's really good. The last thing I was going to say about this before we actually talk about golf is, Jason, you were talking earlier about, or one of y'all was talking earlier about the way that AI sort of reduces friction. And I saw this quote from, it was on Every's a newsletter that I read, and the quote was said, but friction, once an indispensable process of building competency and perspective, is vanishing to AI. A single prompt generates polished landing pages, complete brand systems, and ships working applications. The fruit that once required long, arduous labor now drops directly into our laps, ripe yet uncannily hollow. And I was like, wow, that's true. And I was like, but what's the result of that? And the next quote was, taste isn't any one thing, it's your thing, and it's a product of friction. So I think the result of a lot of this removal of the friction in our lives of getting answers and getting information and getting all these things is that we lose some tastes that we've built up over the years. So if like, okay, I've developed taste because of friction, and that has been a very powerful sort of guiding light for me as I've thought, like you have, James, a lot about AI over the last several months and years. Okay, I want to talk about golf. Let's first hear from our one of our sponsors of this episode, and then we will come back and talk about the future of pro golf as a media product. Let's talk about Meridian putters. You've got your Meridian with you right now?
I'm looking at it right now, baby. Charleston, 370 grams, crisp. Love it.
That's a great one. I actually don't have mine with me because I gave all of mine away to other normal sport employees or friends. And yeah, I'm gonna have to get on their website here over Black Friday because they have their biggest sale of the year, 35% off, meridianputters.com. So I'm gonna have to jump on there and
no
get one
freebies in the game.
Yeah, exactly. Get one back in my possession. Shout out to Meridian for sponsoring the podcast, and let's get back to James. Okay, James. Future of pro golf as a media product. I wanted to use, probably a lot of people who are listening to this either watched or have heard of the Internet Invitational, and that obviously just wrapped up. Very controversial ending. But I wanted to kind of use that as a jumping off point. We don't even have to mention that necessarily, but it got me thinking about, okay, what are some, speaking of half-baked ideas, what are some half-baked ideas or thoughts about the future of pro golf or just golf as an entertainment media product And yeah, it can be literally anything you want. I know you spend all day like I do thinking about this stuff. So I'll let you go first and we can kind of just riff on each other's ideas.
All right. Yeah. My first thing here is something I feel so passionately about, and I'll try to keep from yelling about it if I can. But it would be for the major pro golf tours to relax their DMCA approaches and sort of finally allow the floodgates to open for creators and people who work in the media to post highlights and things that they're seeing with their own eyes and videos. I think this is like such a silly self-owned by every major sports league that sort of refuses to allow on-site video. And I know that the PGA Tour and LIV and the LPGA are not alone in this. I know this is sort of a function of how TV rights are operated. But I think, one of the sort of learnings that if you are paying attention to the media world, you should be having right now is that we live in a world of short form video. We live in a visual world. And that doesn't mean that there's not value for writing. I think there's actually an argument that there's more value for writing now than ever. It just has to be a very specific kind. But I think if you are thinking about your product as a sports league and you are looking into the world of, of how we could be making more money and maximizing our fan engagement and involving more people who are not normally involved in our events, I think the easiest way to do this is to take advantage of the army of people that you already have who already have the skill sets for capturing entertainment and packaging it in a way that people want to receive, who already have followings, and giving them the freedom to publish things that they have shot and videoed themselves on site at events. I don't see the argument that I've heard in response to this from people at the major tours is basically that, if we allowed you to film the footage, then, what's to stop, you from trying to sell your footage the way that CBS and NBC try to sell their footage to advertisers. And I understand the argument, but it's apples and oranges. Like you're playing in a different playing field. And so for me, like the biggest thing that I would change if I could change anything about golf, I would let people like you and me and Jason and everyone else in the world, I would let them publish with free reign onto the internet or at least relax the rules a little bit. We don't have to go the full, extremist version of this quite yet. But I would relax the rules and I would let the video flow because I think it's the world that we live in right now. And if we can just take advantage of that, I feel like the golf world will be so much bigger as a result.
Do you think the fear from leagues over stuff like this is more about their contractual obligations with Golf Channel or CBS or ESPN or wherever? Or is it more about like, hey, if we do this, then all of a sudden the only people that are going to be watching this product are the curators, because everybody else is just going to say, well, I'll just follow the curators, like worldwide wob on like with the NBA, and I'm not even going to watch the games because they'll tell me everything that I need to know. Which of those do you think is more of a concern for any of the tours?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a very reductionist worldview to say that if our sport gets bigger, but we're not directly profiting from it, then, it's not worth doing. I just think that's so silly. But I do think that to some degree that is the worldview. I think the partners, the so-called partners are a really easy boogeyman for this argument. I mean, it is written into the contracts that, there are certain video rules, like nobody's lying about that existing.
Right.
But I think there's an overstatement about how much each side particularly cares about that. I think both sides sort of like to blame the other. The networks like to blame the tours like to blame the networks. Yeah. But what I think personally is that it's exactly what you're saying. I think there's some fear that they could dilute their product by opening up to the masses. And I understand, we heard obviously PGA Tour, the new CEO, Brian Rowlap, mentioned scarcity as one of the biggest tenets that he's hoping to bring to the tour. And I totally get it. Like I hear that argument 100% of the way. But I think, you kind of need to have a big tent philosophy if you're running a sports league. You want to have as many people as possible consuming your work. You want to have people diving in on every possible angle that they can reach. And what we've learned from the explosion of YouTube golf over the last few years is that the PGA Tour and LIV and the LPGA and the DP World Tour were all missing golf fans who were out there who wanted to consume golf content, but we're not being served it in the right way. And now all of these YouTubers come in, they're able to package it in a fun way. They're putting it on a platform that's free to watch whenever you want it. And there are millions of people who are signing up. To now, we have the tours reaching out to the YouTube creators, trying to get them to give, to partner with them. So I think what we've seen here is that like there is definitely an opportunity, and there's a much wider base of people who could love golf. And I just don't think that we're necessarily engaging with them in the most sincere way. I mean, I wrote about this actually, ironically, from the side of I-80 in Utah, about how there's a study that came out that most sports fans have sort of developed their most sincere fandom by the age of 8 years old. I believe it was either 8 or 11, or maybe 8 to 11. And basically the argument was, if you didn't have some sort of like iconic sporting event between the ages of 8 and 11, it was unlikely that you were to become a real diehard fan of your team. Now, this was a study of baseball teams. Baseball is different from golf. Like, I get there, there's nuance involved here, but I think the sort of underarching point of that entire study is that if you want to reach fans, you have to reach them young, and you have to really compel them to watch your sport. I don't think golf is doing either of those things right now. And whatever the argument is in favor of keeping the rules the way that they are, if you're really invested in the long-term growth of the sport, you would be invested in something that would help you reach that young audience to grow your base.
See, I almost feel, I agree with you about the DMCA thing, but I almost feel it for the purpose of serving the already entrenched audience that you have. Rather, so like, for example, I got popped, this was like 4 years ago now, during Kapalua, maybe less than that, but during Kapalua, Spieth was playing Kapalua. I don't know how he got in, because he wasn't winning, but he went up to, I can't remember exactly how it went, but he went up to a marshal or somebody that was like right there and said, "Hey, I appreciate that you're betting." They were like talking about betting on a putt that he was about to hit. And he was like, "I appreciate this. I would do, if I were you, I would do it too, but try to keep it down." And it was like this hilarious like interaction that you would not really get in another professional sporting event. And I clipped it, and it was awesome. Like like everybody commented on it. Like people loved it. It was really cool. But I was thinking about how somebody who is not into golf would not see that and like have these 10 things click into place for them, because they don't have a history with Spieth. They don't really understand how weird it is that somebody would be 4 feet away talking during some, like all these different, like very golfy things. So I think the stuff you're talking about almost serves the current audience and entrenches them more than necessarily drawing in a new audience. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I think it works on both sides of the argument, is, 1,000 true fans or like 10 million passive fans, whatever you want, on either side of that. I think if you're serving both of those groups, you're doing well as a sports league. I don't think that we should be looking at anything involving that as anything other than good news for the tours, if they were acting out in pursuit of either the diehards or kind of growing the tent.
Yeah. Okay, so my first one is that I think professional golf, I wrote about this actually earlier this year, and I believe it just as much now as I did then. And I actually wrote about it in today's newsletter, which when people hear this will be about a week ago. I think golf is in the best position of any professional sport to be disrupted by non-professionals. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that it's the one sport, you could argue tennis or pickleball or something, running maybe, but that everybody can do, right? Like I can't go out and play tackle football. I've talked about this a bunch. Like that would be weird and I would get hurt. And so I'm never going to do that. So there's a moat there that football has, or that even like professional baseball. I'm 40. I'm not going to go play baseball, other than with my kids. So there's a little bit of a moat there that these other professional leagues have that golf doesn't. It's very, there's just not a moat. And then the second reason is I actually think, and this is more of a TV take than anything, I actually think it's harder to differentiate between a really great pro and like a pretty good amateur in golf than maybe in any other sport. Like if you watch somebody who's like a bad or somebody that's like a good Division III college basketball player against a pro, you'd be like, this gap is insane. Like they're not even playing the same sport. And while that's also true in golf, like Rory is so much better than a Division III golfer, I think TV maybe flattens that out more than other sports to where you're like, Brad Dahlke looks pretty good to me in the Internet Invitational. Like I don't know. In my head, I know there's a vast difference between him and Xander Schauffele, but that gets a little bit flattened in some of these online videos and things that they participate in. And so for those two reasons, I think professional golf is in a very vulnerable place and we've seen it. I don't know how much further it will go, but I think it's in a very vulnerable place to be disrupted.
That's interesting. How would you disrupt the spectator sport if you could? What would you do to change it?
Well, I think it's happening with stuff like the Internet Invitational and with Bryson's Break 50, like just all these things where you're like, it's just a more compelling product in a lot of ways. It's shorter. It's people that I'm just more interested in, like, I mean, not personally, but people would say, hey, I'm more interested in Portnoy than I am, Joe Highsmith winning at Palm Beach.
Yeah.
Or whatever tournament he won. And so it's just like that part of it is really interesting to me. And it's a problem that Brian Rolap has on the PGA Tour side that he had other problems at the NFL that he had to deal with, but I don't know that this was necessarily a problem he had to deal with at the NFL. Jason, do you have something on that?
I think there's interesting parallels to be drawn to other sports in terms of broadcast, but also like reacting to the new attention span of modern times. I think chess does a really great job of that with their Titled Tuesday series. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, where they have weekly tournaments, but they're like very rapid games. So they have like 5-minute games, 3-minute games, 1-minute games of all the top players. And it's just such an easily digestible product. It's going to be there like every Tuesday. You just kind of pop in. It's not a big commitment like a golf tournament would be. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe do you think they can take some things away from other sports in terms of like the flexibility to the modern times?
It's funny, my colleague Sean Zock has had this opinion for years that every PGA Tour leader, when they walk off the course after their round, should be allowed to skip media obligations, but should have to sit down and provide a shot-by-shot recounting of their round for like something that will be super cut into a 10 or 12-minute YouTube video. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like every conversation in this kind of fits, fits on both sides of this, which is like, Kyle, on your side, you're talking about sort of improving or adding some sort of element of the spectator component to pro golf, and inviting some sort of amateur to compete in a PGA Tour event to be able to specify those differences, or just create the creation of much larger like amateur catalog of golf content. But there's also the other side of this, which is like sort of making things a little bit easier or blurring the lines a little bit further on the YouTube component into the from the pro golf component into the YouTube component, taking advantage of the fact that pro golf has massive amounts of content, but is not necessarily activating it for YouTube, and making things that work a little bit better on that platform, or that work a little bit better on TikTok or Instagram, or, on these massive platforms where people are.
And I think that was, you wrote about it as well, but I think the success of the Internet Invitational was just the post-production of it, and that they were able to craft like something that's cinematic in a way that draws you into the story and the storyline. But that takes like another big leap after the content was recorded, which maybe the PGA Tour is lacking a little bit. The Masters has it figured out somehow. Mets baseball production has it figured out, but yeah.
I think it'd be really interesting because you think about the guys that have become beloved that are not superstars. Like obviously people are going to love Rory and Scotty and Spieth and JT and whatever. But you think about the two guys over the last 5 years that have become beloved that are not superstars, and it's Max Homa and And who was I just thinking of?
Joel Damon.
Joel Damon. Yes. Sorry. Gosh, all I could think of was Gino. And I was like, well, that's not who. I mean, he's beloved too, but Joel Damon, Max Homa. And they really became beloved because of their presence outside of the PGA Tour, right? It was, whether it was online or on Twitter or whatever, people were like, oh, I kind of like this guy. And so I think it would behoove the PGA Tour or the European Tour or whatever to get some of these lesser known guys into the next Internet Invitational and let them be. And the problem, James, is like, as we know, like just a lot of these guys don't have personalities. Like they're not interesting. And so it becomes a difficult thing when you put them in situations where it's like, hey, just be yourself, be interesting. And it's like, well, they're just not. Like, what do you want me to do? You know? So I don't know. I think the tour is very vulnerable in that space. And I don't know that anything about this year has gotten me off that corner.
This was actually my sort of second half-baked idea, was to kind of continue blurring the lines between YouTube and PGA Tour golf, or just major men's professional golf, by having the players be more, frequent contributors in the YouTube world, whether that's through their own channels like Bryson and Tommy Fleetwood and Phil Mickelson, or whether that's through, some sort of PGA Tour channel where there's a new franchise that comes out that brings players in a new light, that allows us to see the sport in a very different way. Like the options are definitely there to do something. And I don't know, Kyle, I always think about this quote from Rob Manfred about Mike Trout, which is probably about 10 years old now. And he said, player marketing requires one thing for sure: the player. And the argument was basically like, if the player doesn't want to be involved in the process, then it's not going to matter how good the idea is or how well produced it is, or if you've got, $50,000 cameras shooting all of the action. If the player doesn't want to be involved, it's not going to be that interesting to begin with. And so I do think that when you're, talking or thinking about these things in terms of what could actually happen in the PGA Tour world, probably the biggest thing to remember is that eventually the PGA Tour has to win this argument with the players. They have to convince the guys to be part of this too. They can't just merely show up and say, hey, we're pointing a camera in your face, now you got to answer 12 questions in front of Hot Wings. Like, no, you got to actually want to be part of it. And I think that's that is a challenge that is unique to golf as well. I think we've seen it in other sports. And I think, sometimes it's hard because I fall on both sides of this. There are times where I'm like, man, these golfers just aren't that interesting. And then there are times where I'm like, man, these golfers are really freaking interesting, but they're just not put in positions where they feel comfortable being that way. I mean, I just think about Ben Griffin all the time. He's such like a funny, funky guy. And if you don't get him in the right environment, he might seem like really stilted and very quiet and reserved. And in reality, he's like incredibly funny and has a great sense of humor and is definitely willing to engage and do all sorts of funny stuff. So I think there's definitely two sides to this. There's the players being open to it, and then there's the tours providing the right avenue to actually execute on that idea. But I think in either side of the case, we need to see more professional golfers existing in the ecosystem that most people are watching golf right now, which is, on YouTube and in short form video, because there should never be a world where Grant Horvat or, any of the good guys are more famous than, Scotty Scheffler or someone of that liking. And yeah, they might not be more famous than Scotty Scheffler right now, but like, are they more famous than the 45th ranked golfer in the world right now? Like,
it's not close.
Probably yes. And exactly. Probably not even close. And like that's it, in my mind, should be a huge problem for the tours.
It is a huge problem. I think also, I was actually thinking the name Ben Griffin as you said it, because I thought about the interview that he did, or that Solly did with him on No Lane Up. And you're like, God, this is freaking good. Like, this guy is the most like maybe milquetoast white, just golfer guy, but he like came across as like interesting and kind of cocky, and like he wears Lord Abbott on his shirt, and you're like, I think I'm like in on this guy. Like it was a very strange sensation. And I guess my point there is, like, Solly's such a good interviewer, and I think he probably doesn't get enough credit for that. And you get these guys in front of other people that are maybe not as skilled or don't speak the language as well as somebody like Solly or just Solly. And yeah, they don't seem interesting. So I do think, I think there's a little bit of a, like, I think golfers are more, and this has always been true, they're more entertainers than like football. Like the NFL, the product just speaks for itself. Like it's very straightforward. Like here's the regular season, here's the playoffs, here's your fantasy team. Like you don't really need those guys to talk or be entertainers or whatever. And with golf, partly because of the fracturing of all the organizations, you've got these 5 organizations and it's not linear and it's kind of a mess. Like you do need them a little bit to be entertainers. And we've seen that with Bryson. We've seen how much success he's had, obviously, in doing that. And so if you do need them to be entertainers, you need people to throw them not alley-oops in terms of easy questions, but get in there, mix it up with them, speak their language. I would be, if I'm the tour, I'm lining people up to be on Solly, on the No Laying podcast with Solly. Like because he's such a good question asker and whatever. But I'm a Ben Griffin fan now specifically because of that interview. And so I don't know. That I'm saying a bunch of things. I don't even know where we started with that, but that's just sort of how I feel about it.
No, I think to your point, Kyle, I am a golf fan today. Like I'm a rabid, diehard golf fan today because when I was a caddy in college and I was first getting into golf, you know, in a really sincere way, and I was trying to figure my way through the sport, I listened to podcasts like No Laying Up, and I heard interviews with pro golfers like Max Homa, and I said, man, these guys are really cool. I am like into this. I like what's going on here. I enjoy the conversation. And I think that, you know, the answer 10 years from now might be an interview on No Laying Up. It might be an interview on a YouTube show that doesn't exist and won't exist for another 9 years. Like, who knows? But I think the broader thing that you're getting at here, which is like, you have to put your players in a chance to be seen and heard, and not just, you know, necessarily inside of the glass walls of you know, your headquarters, or inside, you know, the interview room with the guy who's your paid producer and the, you know, the paid editor who's are all working for the tour and would not want to put anything in that might toe the line. Like, that's a good thing. That should be viewed as a good thing. You're putting your players in a new place to succeed. And I think like it's easy to sort of talk about these things in the abstract, and certainly it benefits both of us when, you know, players are more accessible and willing to chat and whatnot. But the truth of this is that, like, I am living proof. I'm only here right now because of things like No Laying Up and the Shotgun Start, which I started consuming 10 years ago, and like completely changed the course of my life. So there is a real success story there for people, you know, being part of a bigger thing in golf.
I think the risk there for the tour, James, is like, okay, you put players in position to say some stuff, and they might say some stuff that hurts you in the short term, right? And it's really hard to trust that in the long term, like having players be interesting and putting them in positions like that where maybe they say something controversial, or maybe they're you know, say what they think. In the long term, that's great for your league, because in the short term, it doesn't feel great because you lose a corporate sponsorship or something happens where you have to deal with kind of a little bit of a mess. And everybody in all these leagues, and even in organizations that we have worked at, is so incentivized by the short term at the expense of the long term. And I just think that is, it's not great for the sustainability of a business in the long term. Jason, what were you going to say?
I think that gets to the point of just friction that you were talking about before, Kyle. The friction, it makes things interesting as well. And I think the Internet Invitational also proved that as well, that like the friction of those difficult moments showed the character of the people who were playing and created interesting storylines. James, what would you, if you were running the PGA Tour at this moment, what kind of things would you be cherry picking from the Internet Invitational to improve your product?
Well, first off, I would be hiring every single editor who is involved on that project. I mean, those guys, like truly the most unsung heroes in maybe the history of content creation are the guys who edited that video. Good Lord, it was like, what, 15 hours of content? I was like almost sick to my stomach thinking about how many man hours went into doing that. So yeah, I'd be talking to them first, maybe giving them a lifetime deal or something to come over. But I think I would also just be looking into the general nature of like how that entire show was not just produced, but then how it was distributed and how the people who were involved with it helped to promote it as well. It was like a very seamless look into how a media product should work in the YouTube world, which is like you have a good video with a lot of really famous internet people who want to be part of it. And then you have all of those people, taking part in a 3-hour long episode thing where you get a real look into who those people are, which is compelling to the reader and also to the algorithm, very importantly important to the algorithm. And then on top of that, you have all of those same people then going out into the marketplace and promoting the fact that they were part of it. And then that's how something goes from being like a thing that a few people are talking about on Twitter into something that golf.com is writing about and the Normal Sport podcast is talking about, is that like you have people who are actually voices with actual sway and influence who are promoting the thing that they're doing and promoting being part of it. I mean, I think that is that lesson. This is something I think about all the time. Brian Rolap's first press conference, he gave this sort of offhand quote that's like stuck in my head. And he basically was just like, this isn't that hard. Like it's all you have to do is like, give them a right product, give fans a reason to watch, and they'll come back and they'll do it. And I just keep thinking about that. Like this isn't that hard. And when you see, something like the Internet Invitational, like absolutely full respect to the editors for whom that job was really freaking hard. But for everyone else, like it really isn't that hard. It's just doing the functions of the job as you know how to do it. And ultimately you have this smash hit success on YouTube. You gave out $1 million to someone, to a couple people, which is like amazing. And then on top of that, you, I'm sure, reaped more than that in both AdSense, dollars just in terms of YouTube advertising, but also you've reaped more than that in terms of brand equity and the amount of people who now want to be part of the next one and what comes with that. And there's just so much opportunity that sort of cuts through with all of this stuff that I think if you're a tour like the PGA Tour, if you're Brian Rolap looking at this stuff, I hope what you're saying is this isn't that hard, but also this is a playbook that we should sort of be stealing for ourselves.
Well, to the point of having everybody be everybody that was in it is an evangelist for it. That's the exact same concept as don't DMCA stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't DMCA stuff, you certainly have 50 people that have like James and Fried Egg and all these different people that are like an evangelist for your product. Literally, they're taking it out to the masses. And you're hopefully bringing some people back and getting the people that are already there more entrenched. So, I've got another one. What is this? My second one, Jason?
It's your second one. Yeah.
Okay. This is this is like quarter baked. I don't know if I actually believe this. I don't think broadcasters that are league partners should also have I don't think I believe this, but I'm gonna say it. I don't think broadcasters that are league partners with like say the tour or the NFL or whatever should also have like pretend like they have editorial objectivity. And I started thinking about this whenever earlier this year, James, and I really wanted to talk to you about this publicly or privately. We never did talk about it, but the NFL and ESPN basically became not just broadcast partners, but like actual partners in that how does it go? The NFL owns part of ESPN now. And so like, good luck trying to write something on ESPN.com that is, like an opinion or critical of the ownership of an owner of the NFL. Like they literally like own part of your company. Like that's 10 levels above where you're at editorially. And, I worked at a place where I worked at CBSSports.com for 12 years, and this was not this was never like a huge problem, but part of it was because I knew I couldn't say certain things that would make it a huge problem. And that kept me, again, this was not like a thing every day, but it did keep me at times from, like, when Live happened, I was unable to kind of say some things that I really wanted to say as a commentator and a person with an opinion on this stuff that I think people wanted to hear from because of my company's relationships with the PGA Tour and with the like all these different places. And I get that. Like that, at some point, I am a liability. If you're making, as CBS as like CBS the channel, if you're making hundreds of millions of dollars from broadcasting the PGA Tour or the Masters of the PGA Championship, there's no like incentive for any of your people to say anything controversial or anything at all, because they're a business liability. I was a business liability in a lot of ways, and I knew that, and that didn't keep me from writing things that I meant or that were meaningful. But I just think that is a huge, like, it's just as more and more money goes into these leagues and these events, like, to have both the broadcast and the editorial side just becomes, I think, a much bigger problem going into the future. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. It's a huge problem. I think it comes back to something that I believe like incredibly vehemently as someone trying to, practice journalism and create for the world around me. It's like there is first and foremost a degree of individual responsibility that falls upon every person doing their job to do it in the most ethical and upstanding way possible. I think, when you talk about the ESPN NFL deal, probably the best thing supporting ESPN's editorial independence at this point is the fact that they're part of the Walt Disney Corporation, which is an absolutely enormous corporate entity with 1,000 layers of bureaucracy and 42 million, middle managers who are overseeing everything that goes on. And, that sounds like a bad thing. And I would argue for the most part, it is a bad thing. But when it comes to the work of actually doing journalism, like, there are terrific reporters working for ESPN. I, thought of Don Van Natta as soon as you mentioned this. He, I remember him tweeting the day that the deal was announced, like, I've been told by my bosses that my journalism will not be affected, but if it is, I'll leave and I'll go work somewhere else. And I think that is ultimately the personal responsibility that sort of we all bear as people trying to do this job in a really honest and sincere way. And I think when you look at the real failures of that happening, like, failures in journalism, 80% of them are like just stuff that happens in businesses, like just failures of the way the business is set up, failures of management or review or whatever. But 20% of it is like people just sort of abdicating their duty either to protect someone who doesn't deserve protecting or because they think they're doing the right thing by their company. And like, this is a point that I personally have made, and I don't have nearly the ethical concerns that anyone that we've discussed, are involved. It's just like, it's my job to be ethical. It's my job to uphold that. It's not my boss's job to tell me yes or no. It's not, my our publisher or ownership. Like, eventually if I have to hear from them, I'm sure I will hear from them, and like that will be a separate conversation. But like, as far as my day-to-day job is concerned, it's on me to do it in the most honest and sincere way possible. And I hope that the people who are consuming it can see that. And then, as we kind of move forward into the future, no matter what ethical entanglements I find myself in, if I can lean on the fact that I know that I'm doing the right thing by myself, I feel like in the long run, I will be able to sort of continue this career in a way where people will still respect the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure. It's one that I don't know. It wasn't as big of a deal 40 years ago when there wasn't as much money involved, but now that there is the scales are tilted so much toward the broadcast away from editorial, which is totally like, I get it. Like, that's totally fine, but it just gets harder to say like, oh, well, these have equal place in our sort of umbrella of business. They just don't. And so I think to pretend like they do. And again, I was not like subverted at CBSSports.com like every other day. Like that's not what I'm saying at all. I just think that,
Yeah.
and if people are like, well, it's not really that big of a deal because you're just talking about the news, like look at what happened to the CBS broadcast because No Laying Up complained, and rightfully complained, about how bad the broadcast was for so long. It got a lot better, right? It improved so much over so many years. So that stuff does matter and it does affect things. And if you're part of the organization that you can't talk about it, like that sucks. Like that's not good for fans and for people who are consuming the product. Okay, let's get to your third one, James. What's your third one here?
My last one, super simple. Speaking of golf television fixes, we need some sort of golf red zone, especially now that we have multiple tours and people competing at the same time. We saw the gold zone, we saw the red zone. I know ESPN has the rights to all this stuff now because of the partnership that you just mentioned. But I would love to see a golf iteration of this exist in the world, especially for the 10 weeks or whatever we have live in the PGA Tour happening at the same time. I think if the solution isn't going to be to bring the best players in the world together more frequently, which is, for the record, far and away the only solution that golf fans should be desiring right now. If that's not the outcome that we're going to receive because of business reasons far beyond our control as golf fans, then I think the least we can do is get a television broadcast where we can see everyone together at the same time. I would at least enjoy watching that.
Who would you have host it?
Well, I'm available if they need me here. Syracuse broadcast journalism graduate. I'd be happy to follow in the shoes of fellow Syracuse alum Scott Hansen and involve myself and Andrew Siciliano for that record, actually. But no, I mean, I think you could bring in any of the major golf broadcasters would be great at it. I mean, obviously Nance is sort of the king of this stuff, but I don't know. It would be cool if they brought in Scott Hansen and had him throwing his weight around for 10 hours on a Sunday afternoon in the golf world.
Do you think that there's enough going on in the golf world because like I watch Red Zone with my kids and we're following fantasy and there's a lot going on, and the early games and you get into the late games, there's always action. Do you think there's enough action to sustain that for golf?
I would argue that the current golf broadcast structure is like as close as ever existed to the Red Zone channel before the Red Zone channel. You basically have 18 different games happening on 18 different fields. You have 72 balls in play, at one time. You could have even more than that, but for the sake of argument, we'll say 72 balls in play at a time. And you've got, 156 competitors in the field that you need to be paying attention to at any time. Like, to me, that sounds a lot like the way that the Red Zone channel exists currently. So I think the change would actually not be all that significant. I think what it would look like in reality is like basically just a double box with Live on one side and the PGA Tour on the other, or a triple box with the LPGA underneath, or a quad box with like the Korn Ferry Tour, the DP World Tour, whatever is going on there. Like I think it would look like the broadcast would feel more or less exactly the same, but it would just be a way to get more golf on your screen. Basically, I think what I'm advocating for is a multi-view of both Live and the PGA Tour, which I don't think we've had either. So I would be fine with that also if they want to involve that.
I like that. I think that could definitely be fun. Okay, I've got a couple more, but I'll just settle on this one for my last one, my third one. I think that this is very self-serving, so take that with a grain of salt if you're listening. I think that curators are in a better position right now than the leagues are. And I don't know that this is specific to golf, but for example, James, like I listen to the Zach Lowe show. I don't watch the NBA, but I listen to the Zach Lowe show because I'm like, sort of interested in the NBA and like, okay, how good is OKC? I kind of want to know, but I'm not going to sit down for like 2.5 hours and watch OKC play Portland, right? But I'm going to listen to like Zach Lowe talk about it for 20 minutes because I'm like interested in it. And I think in this attention economy that you mentioned earlier, where there's only Ben Thompson of Stratechery has talked about this, like writing or like the online world of like writing, video, podcasting is the most competitive industry in the history of the world because you have literally billions of people contributing to it every day. And that is like further sort of fracturing our attention and our interests into the future. And so if people are like, hey, I'm interested in like fishing and golf and I don't know, video games, like they're that person, which is most people I know have multiple interests like that, or they have kids or whatever. They're not going to sit down and watch 8 hours of PGA Tour golf. They might do that for the Masters, but they're not going to do that for the PGA Tour. So instead, they're going to pay me, hey, you go and curate this for me and just like give me the 10 minutes that I need to know. Right? This is already happening, but I think in the attention economy, as that gets further and further and further fractured, that's as a curator, you're in a great spot. As a league, I would be concerned if I'm the NBA or the PGA Tour. The NFL seems like very insulated from everything. Like it's just like it's not like a real thing. But if I'm MLB, if I'm any MLS, any of these places, because I think that the curators are getting more valuable and the league the substance of the league is maybe getting less attention than it has as like in its entirety than it ever has before.
I absolutely love this idea. This is the synthesis of everything that I believe and talk about as a media member is like, you have to be where your audience is and you have to deliver to them what they want to receive. And then if you do that well enough, often enough, you get to tell them every once in a while what they didn't know they want to receive.
Yeah.
And so I think I think that is like the perfect example of that. I think there's something interesting in the way that leagues are operating right now that I guess this sort of comes back to what I was talking about as far as just sort of broadening the video regulations. But I just think at a certain point, there will be such a groundswell of people who are capable of creating off of every major sports event and adding to the discourse and being a component of the experience in one way or another, that we will eventually reach a point where like curators and people doing exactly what you were just talking about are not just an important piece of the business, but like a necessary piece of the business. And I think we're much closer to that than we ever have been.
Do you guys see that happening at every tour stop? This high level of curation and content generation?
Kyle, if you want to be, you can take the John Deere. I'll handle the players and on the Pebble Pro-Am if that works for you.
Well, I think it happens. I think it happens mostly on the PGA Tour, Jason, because I think at the majors, like especially the Masters. One takeaway that Jason and I had from this year is like the Masters is not like the other majors, which is maybe obvious to people. But we were looking back at some of our numbers and just like the memberships that were created around it and the lead up, and it's like, oh, this is like the other three majors plus the Ryder Cup combined, like even beyond that. And so I think people pay a ton of attention to the Masters and sort of the other majors and players, but beyond that, like I think something like Riviera is a really good example of like, man, that used to be like a thing. And to me and to you, it still is. Like I'm in on Riviera. I'm watching almost all of it. But to like my friend Matt that lives in, Central Texas and has 5 kids and like is teaching and doesn't have time for it. It's like, I'd rather give the small amount of golf watching time I do have to the Masters. Like I'm just not going to pay that much attention to Riviera. Therefore, James's role, Jason's role, my role have become more valuable, I guess is maybe the right word, to that person who, again, his attention is divested or is split up amongst all these other places. And so I see it in these like sort of middle to upper PGA Tour events more than I do anywhere else, Jason.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I've always wondered, this conversation could go on forever, but just the idea of like mixing up the formats and just like on those off weeks, like could you make short and snappier formats or match play situations that inherently are going to be kind of a refreshing break in the schedule?
Yeah, I just think you don't want to do that you don't want to do it for everything, right? Like you don't want to replace Riviera, Memorial, and Canadian Open and places like that. But yeah, are we in agreement that the PGA Tour schedule should not be 48 events long? Yes. Like if that is for sure like what I think.
And I mean, honestly, when we look at the history of the PGA Tour, the reason why the 48 event schedule even existed was because they were just trying to raise the overall cost of their TV deal. It wasn't necessarily driven by the fact that the marketplace was absolutely clamoring for 48 weeks of PGA Tour golf in the regular season too. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. It's the same rules apply to them as apply to us. As like, you need to give the people what they want, where they want to receive it. And then if you do it well enough, you get to tell them every so often, to listen a little bit more, or to tune into something different. But you don't get to do that over the course of 30 or 40, consecutive weeks of the season where interesting things aren't really happening all that frequently.
James, I was thinking about this, would you rather own the media rights to all the 48 PGA Tour events, including the players, or own the media rights to the 4 majors plus the Ryder Cup?
But like by 100 miles of 4 majors plus the Ryder Cup. It's just more valuable. There's nothing that's nothing that would be more important to the golf fan, but also to the advertisers paying for golf, especially the fact now that those 5 events are basically the only time we see the best players in the world all together in one place. Just can't see it being more valuable than those 5.
But have you done the math on the annual fee that those places are like if you did the math on okay, here's how much the tour is paid for their however many hour, I don't know what the hour amount is, versus okay, here's the fee that Masters, USGA, like all these places are paid for their 5 weeks of stuff. Like, I think the tour makes more money on that, right?
They do, yeah. It's like 750 to 800 million per year for the PGA Tour right now, and I'm guessing the majors are at like 300-ish million or something like that, just for U.S. partnerships.
Yeah, it's thrown off by the Masters number because Augusta National famously doesn't receive money for their rights because they want control and whatever. We could do a whole podcast on that, but yeah, it's interesting because I agree with you. I'd rather have the majors than the Ryder Cup, but from a financial perspective, it's not even close the other way. And I think to James's point from earlier, that's just it's a tonnage thing. It's like how much can I put on broadcast television, and CBS and NBC and ESPN are just paying for like to fill up these hours, right? And I think that I don't know, it's a weird thing because you're like, you look at the men's pro golf landscape right now, and nobody would say like the PGA Tour is way more valuable than all these other places, and yet the amount of money that they're paid for their product is way more than all the other places.
Yeah, it is interesting though when you think about like, we've heard these ideas floated around that the PGA Tour would use this money from the SSG to turn, to buy some sort of major championship. When you think about how much it would cost to do that, like I forget what the exact numbers are that the PGA Tour took from the SSG, but let's say I know it was more than $1 billion. Let's say it was $1 billion. Of that $1 billion, it would probably cost them at least $900 million to buy the PGA Championship, which is by far the worst of the 4 majors if we're talking about from like a TV rights value standpoint. And so like when you think about exactly the way that all of this looks, it is kind of insane that the PGA Tour is reaping more. But I think what it's reflective of is that it's hard to be it's hard because they're fractured. If you were selling the 4 majors plus the Ryder Cup as a like standalone TV deal, I can't imagine it going for less than $1 billion a year. It's the fact that you have to get all of them piecemeal, and you don't get to have, all 7 days of coverage. ESPN takes a few days, and then CBS takes a few days, or whatever it is, that you wind up with this like sort of very fractured and, ultimately, if not comparably, like slightly less, financially viable than the PGA Tour event. I think the fact that you would be able to theoretically in this world combine all of them would make you a lot more money in the long run.
That's an interesting point. Okay, we're gonna do one more thing. We were gonna do like 4 more things, but we're running out of time. We're gonna do one more thing.
I'm long-winded.
Yeah, no, we both could just talk about all this for a long time. We're going to do one more thing, and it's going to be the hottest take that you have right now that you actually kind of believe. But first, let's hear from one more of our sponsors. Okay, Jason Page, we're here to talk about Shipsticks, or I'm here to talk about Shipsticks because I don't know about you. I'm traveling a bunch over Thanksgiving, the holidays. Are you traveling for the holidays?
I'll be there. I'll be in Pennsylvania for Christmas.
Okay, so great news for you. If you want to get your clubs from Amsterdam to Pennsylvania, Shipsticks is a good way to do it. They ship internationally, domestically. They've been a great sponsor for us, and yeah, it's a fantastic way to get your clubs from. The amazing thing to me is like you just leave them on your front porch, and they show up wherever you're going.
You don't have that feeling in the airport. Like, it's like the worst feeling when you're standing there at the baggage and you're kind of like, am I ever going to see my clubs again? Are they going to arrive in one piece? It's a very unique, sort of traumatizing experience. So it's nice to avoid that at all costs. Maybe traumatizing is a big word.
Yeah, unique traumatizing experience is a good way to put it. So don't have that unique traumatizing experience. Check out Shipsticks, shipsticks.com. Thank you to Shipsticks for sponsoring not only this show, but also our newsletter this year. Okay, Jason, let's talk about seed golf. I've got a short story to tell you. I was playing golf actually last night as we are talking about this, and it was a double date. So my wife and I were double dating with another couple, and we played PGA Frisco, the par 3 course. Fantastic time. So everybody's getting their golf balls out on the first hole, right? If people haven't been to the par 3 in PGA Frisco, incredible experience. Under the lights, music going, drinks. It's awesome. They should be paying us for this ad also. But so my buddy pulls out Titleist, gives his wife Titleist, and they're about to hit. And I pull out my seed ball, right? Because that's what we're using, seed golf balls, right? And we're hitting shots. And my buddy's a good golfer. He's probably a 2. And he's, we're hitting off turf mats. So he's spinning balls back on these like little 70-yard pitch shots. But my golf ball's doing the exact same thing as his Titleist is doing. I'm spinning these seeds back on these 70, 80-yard pitch shots. And he's commenting on it like, man, that one had a lot of spin on it. And I'm like, yeah, it's a seed golf ball. So that has been my recent experience with seed. I don't know if you've had any recent experiences, but it's been a pleasure being with them and their products.
It's very pleasantly surprising when you give the ball to someone else. I mean, that's the nice thing about having such affordable golf balls is that you can just like hand them out and then see the reaction from friends when they are like kind of having the realization themselves that the balls are like super nice. And then they come back to you like, you got any more of those seeds? And then it's like, I got you.
That should be their new tagline. If you're listening, seed, you got any more of those seeds? Okay, thanks to them for sponsoring, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Okay, James, give me the hottest take you have right now that you actually kind of believe. This is a little bit in the same vein as what we were talking about earlier. Those were more media specific. This one can be anything in golf that you're like, okay, this is a take that I have. It's pretty hot, but I think I believe it.
Okay, so this one, there's some backstory on this, but I believe this from the deepest part of myself as a human being. Jim Nance could run for and successfully win a presidential election. I feel so strongly about this. You have absolutely no idea. All right, so I'll lay out like just the feasibility argument. First of all, Jim, super interested like history and like politically, he was very, very good friends with George H.W. Bush, is good friends with Bill Clinton. He spent a lot of time around like very impactful members of the U.S. political landscape in his life. Second off, beloved and known by basically everyone. So he's an easy guy to get along with. He's very good at delivering his message. And I just think right now what America is looking for is someone to just wrap them up in a warm hug. Tell them everything's going to be all right. Be the leader that everybody's dreaming of. And I feel like that's what a Sunday afternoon on the PGA Tour is for Jim Nance. That's what he does better than anyone is make me feel like I'm being wrapped up in a warm hug and watching the golf play out in front of me. So that is my like theoretical argument. After having spent some time with him in Pebble Beach earlier this year, I firmly believe that if he wanted to do it, he absolutely could, because I just think he like has that charisma, that like aura factor. But then the actual legitimate argument for this is I'm a huge fan of a lot of different like sort of political writing. I'm a huge like just political guy. This is just something I'm like sort of idly fascinated in. And one thing that I've been like insanely into recently is this idea that like everything is television. I'm blanking on the writer's name right now. Derek Thompson. Thank you. I kept wanting to say Ben Thompson because I think you brought up the Stratechery guys earlier. But yeah, Derek Thompson has this theory that everything is television, right? That like everything in the world is sort of being condensed into the idea of existing on TV. And really the central point of this argument is that every successful politician of the 21st century has been someone who was successful on TV. And so I think, why not just pull out your presidential candidate from television? He's already been primed. He knows how to handle it. He's not going to be, stressed on the debate stage. He's going to know how to handle the room and talk to people about it. Jim Nance could run for president tomorrow, and we'll see. He would have to earn my vote just like any candidate would have to earn my vote. But he's starting off in a pretty good spot, I would say, from the fact that I've heard of Call of Masters for my entire life.
It sounds like you would be his chief of staff, is what you're saying.
Speechwriter, maybe. Yeah, he could bring me in for that. That.
Oh man, if we get,
I'd like to join the marketing team. Can I sign up for that illustration job?
If James and I got to tag team speechwriting for Jim Nance, that would be extraordinary. I think this is an amazing take, and I think that you hear these ideas all the time of like, oh, The Rock could be president if he wanted to. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but I think that there's a certain, like you said, James, there's a certain aura that you need to have as a politician, as somebody that's entering kind of that. It's a different arena. And I think Nance would like strangely be incredible at it. Like the things that he's amazing at are remembering people, kindness, speaking well, and looking like he kind of owns the room. And you're like, well, like that's how you win. That's literally how you win a presidential election, right? Like he would make the grandma in like Western Iowa feel like she was the most important person in the world, because that's how he makes you and I feel, right? And he does that to everybody. It's unbelievable, like how he's able to do that. And I'm in on this. I think we should tell him that he should run.
I think there's this thing in there's this political science thing. I'm forgetting the name of the theory, but basically it posits like that the vast majority of a presidential candidate's success comes down to whether or not you would want to have a beer with them. Yeah. Like their like capacity, their score, and their percentage of people that they can win over who would want to have a beer with them is like an incredible predictor of their success as a presidential candidate. I feel like that's the entire work of being a sports broadcaster, is being someone that people want to sit down and have a beer with. And like I've heard Joe Buck talk about that. I've heard Ian Eagle talk about that. Like certainly Jim Nance gives off a very similar, vibe and aura. I don't know. I'm sure like he would probably detest this conversation even existing on the grounds of like the fact that he's perfectly happy doing what he's doing right now. Sure. But I'm happy to throw his hat into the ring. America needs a leader. We need someone to bring us back together. We need someone who's going to step in front of the, just imagine he's walking down the West Wing. He's about to deliver prepared remarks to the country. He says, "Hello, friends." And then, just delivers whatever the news is. You'd be feeling better about it afterward. I don't know. I feel strongly about this.
We don't need a leader. We need a friend. That's the starting point, I think, for the
Well, I don't know if that should be you take care of the marketing. We'll do the speech writing here. The other thing that I was thinking about, like, he has so much. This is so dumb, but like, you think about a lot of presidents over the year who have had ties to Augusta and to like not just the course and the place, but the people there. Like he would have so many people that are a lot more powerful than me and James behind him and like pushing for something like this. I'm convinced Jim Nance could be the next president of the United States. Like I don't even think it's I don't think it's like that hot of a take. Like I think he like if he ran, I think he would win.
I look forward to when we're being interviewed for the documentary, 2 weeks before Inauguration Day in 2028. We could sit down together for that one.
For sure. Okay. My hottest take that I have right now that I kind of actually believe is that Phil Mickelson's media career, and these are sort of like at an intersection with one another with Nance and Phil, but Phil Mickelson's media career would have been better than his playing career.
Yeah, I love this.
Which is pretty crazy because his playing career is basically top 10 of all time, depending on you could have him at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, anywhere in there, and nobody would bat an eye. But I think that we've gotten glimpses of it over the years. Obviously, Harding Park when he was in the booth. I think he would have been extraordinary, and maybe he still will be. I'm hopeful that he's not going in the right direction, but I'm hopeful at some point he can still be in behind the microphone, because I think that the mixture of sort of will say anything with also has like accomplished everything. Like that mixture is pretty amazing. Like it makes you a little bit untouchable in the booth. I mean, we saw this with Johnny Miller, right? Like Johnny Miller could kind of say whatever he wanted, and he also accomplished a ton as a player. But Phil is like 5x that. Like he accomplished more than Johnny Miller, and I think he would probably say some crazier things than Johnny Miller. Now, I think you do have to be willing to put in the work. I think this is where we see broadcasters get into trouble, because they get into their like late 60s or 70s and they're kind of like, whatever, I can just wing it. And you can notice a difference. So I do think Phil would have had to be willing to put the work in. But if he would have been willing to do that, man, I just think he would have been unbelievable as a color commentator, as somebody who has been in every single situation that any of these guys could find themselves in and can speak to it almost in a tongue-in-cheek way, but also like with some gravitas that a lot of other people don't have.
No golfer, I think, has ever been a better speaker and quipper about the things that he's dealt with than Phil has been just throughout the course of his life, throughout the course of his career. I mean, just look at how many moments. It's harder now in the sort of post-live years to remember exactly how popular Phil was at his height in like, 05 through 2012 or whatever you'd want to call it. Like, that was incredible. His pull, his gravitas, his ability to sort of like just completely command a crowd, and the complete adoration of every golf fan who was at a tournament. Like, it was unbelievable. I would argue for a good portion of my childhood as a golf fan, Phil was more popular in my household than Tiger was, even though Tiger was a significantly more famous and, more prolific and more, skilled player. Like Phil was by far more popular in my household. And, I think that level of popularity combined with that capacity to be an entertainer and that just sort of innate ability to like understand the timing and the delivery that comes with being on TV, like it would make him a really good politician, but it would also make him a really good sports broadcaster as well. And so I don't know, I could see him, I still think if he wanted to do it, it would take him some time, but I think he could probably win over, a network to give him a job and then win over the golf audience once he was in that job. Yeah. But it is interesting. Like it does seem like he at that 2020 PGA Championship had an insane level of just credibility to step into that job. I remember getting on the next CBS Sports press conference after that and asking Sean McManus, who was the chairman at the time, if they were considering hiring Phil full-time after that press conference in 2020. Now, he goes on to win the PGA the following year. He gets the exemption into the rest of the majors. And that, few steps later brings us to where we are today. But I think when you think about where he was in that moment, I think somebody would be willing to take a chance on him. And I could definitely see him still having an incredibly successful broadcast career. I think he's not far off from that guy. And, you know, this world we live in, it's so minute to minute, like everyone would forget about every sin that came before it.
Yeah.
If he delivered a good line about Scottie Scheffler, you know, down the stretch at the US Open or whatever it is.
From my understanding, they were considering hiring Phil at that time. Now, I don't know how seriously, because that was sort of the end of the Faldo era before Trevor Immelman, who's been really, really good and kind of a breath of fresh air there. But if you look at the NBC side, I mean, like they would, the opinion, maybe this wouldn't be the case. They would, or they should, and I think they would hire Phil so quickly to be I mean, they've just had so many struggles over there with like, okay, well, we've got Kisner, we got Brandel, but Kisner's playing, but like we got, you know, like, okay, well, do we have Faxon, but now we have like 8 people in the booth. Like, just here's your answer. It's going to be expensive, but it's Phil. Now, again, there's a million problems with that and reasons that they couldn't. But man, if he turned it around over the next 6 months or year and stopped tweeting about oil in California, like we could be cooking there. Jason, what did you have?
Well, I was going to bring in a question like, what is their hesitancy to not bring him in? But maybe that oil comment is kind of making that a little bit more clear.
Well, it's that, and it's, I mean, NBC doesn't want to jeopardize their PGA Tour partnership, right? And to hire an active LIV player and the person who literally created the operating agreement for LIV to exist could be problematic.
Talking about broadcasters not having biases there, like we did before.
Okay, that's all I got, James. We had a bunch of other stuff. We'll have to have you back to work out some of these other questions I had and drafts we were going to do. But thank you for coming on. We talked a lot about AI. We talked a lot about our vision for the future of pro golf, or just golf in general, and the media. And it's always fun to chat with you. Jason, did you have any questions or any mistakes that we made that you wanted to jump in on?
No, I mean, Jim Nance for president, I think we covered pretty much all the bases. I had a lot of questions, but I think we'll just have to run it back and do this either in a newsletter or in another podcast.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This was great.
Guys, I would love that. And thank you both for the work that you guys have been doing. It's really cool to see some, you know, you guys are familiar faces in the golf world, but you're doing something very new. And I think it's really commendable, the approach that you're taking. It's clear there's a lot of thought and intention behind your work. And so I am greatly appreciative that you guys care enough about me to have me come yammer on for an hour and a half with the two of you. I'll be back whenever you want. I'll try to practice speaking a little bit shorter next time.
No, it's great.
Please don't.
I always enjoy our convos, James, and always, I think, walk away thinking differently about things. So that's always appreciated, and you can come back whenever you want. So thanks for the time. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next time.